Hello everyone, and welcome to the DXD Tales. So we are back with an interesting movie on what if Issei became the immortal king of the Underworld, Issei x Grayfia Lucifuge x Rias Gremory. But before we start, I just want to remind you to please subscribe to my channel and hit the like button if you enjoy my content. Let's start the story. Chapter 1. Awakening Sovereignty. Darkness cascaded through the abandoned cathedral like liquid shadow, pooling in corners where light hadn't touched in decades. Issei Hyodo pressed his back against a crumbling pillar. His breathing controlled despite the thrumming of his heart. Blood trickled from a gash above his eye, momentarily blurring his vision before he wiped it away with the back of his hand. "You can't hide forever, human." A voice called out, its feminine lilt incongruous with the malice behind it. "Your soul smells different, special. I'm going to enjoy devouring it slowly." Issei's mind raced, calculating angles and distances. 3 fallen angels circled the cathedral's nave. Rainer, the leader, hovering near the shattered rose window. Mittelt, the blonde pixie-like one, guarding the main entrance, and Kalawarner, tall and imperious, stalking the side aisles. They had cornered him here after ambushing him on his way home from Kuo Academy, their black feathered wings materializing from nothing as they descended upon him. Ordinary humans would have panicked, frozen in terror at the sight of supernatural beings. Issei had simply run, not in blind fear, but with purpose. He'd led them here, to this abandoned place where no innocent bystanders would be caught in the crossfire. I should be terrified, Issei thought, his mind strangely lucid. So why'd I feel like I've been waiting for this my entire life? A sharp crack drew his attention upward. Rainer had hurled a spear of light that splintered the wooden beam above him. Issei dove forward, rolling across the stone floor as debris rained down. His movements were fluid, instinctual, as if his body remembered combat his mind had never experienced. "There you are." Rainer's lips curled into a predatory smile as she materialized another light spear. "Your reflexes are impressive for a human. Almost ashamed to kill you. Why are you doing this?" Issei asked, his voice steadier than he expected. "I've never done anything to you." Kalawarner laughed, a cold sound that echoed through the rafters. "It's not what you've done, boy. It's what you are, or rather, what's inside you." Issei's eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about?" "Enough talk," Rainer snapped, her patience evaporating. "Take him now." Light spears whistled through the air from 3 directions. Issei's perception seemed to slow, his decalculating trajectories in an instant. He bent backward, a spear passing inches from his chest, then pivoted, narrowly avoiding another that embedded itself in the floor. The third, pain lanced rough his shoulder as Mittelt's spear caught him, the light burning like acid where it pierced his flesh. Issei gritted his teeth, refusing to scream as he staggered backward. "First blood," Mittelt giggled, her childlike appearance belied by the cruelty in her eyes. "He's weakening, Rainer." But something strange was happening. Where the spear had wounded him, crimson energy began to pulse beneath Issei's skin. The pain intensified, then transmuted into something else, a heat that spread outward, racing through his veins like liquid fire. "What's happening to him?" Kalawarner's confident voice wavered. "Rainer, his aura." "Impossible," Rainer whispered, her eyes widening. "The awakening shouldn't happen like this. We need to kill him now." They converged on him, light spears forming in their hands. Issei, driven by instinct more than thought, slammed his palm against the stone floor. Crimson lightning erupted from his fingertips, cracking the ancient flagstones and sending a shockwave rippling outward. The fallen angels were thrown back, their wings beating frantically to stabilize themselves. The cathedral began to tremble, dust and mortar showering down as stained glass shattered in the remaining windows. Something was building inside Issei, power he couldn't comprehend, memories that weren't his own flashing behind his eyes. Ancient battlefields, throne rooms hewn from obsidian, a crown of twisted metal and flame. "What am I?" he gasped, clutching his head as the pressure built. His skin felt too tight, as if something beneath it was struggling to break free. The crimson energy enveloped him now, dancing across his body like living flames. When he looked up, his eyes glowed with internal fire. "The seal is breaking," Rainer shouted above the rumbling. "We have to." The cathedral doors burst open, moonlight silhouetting a slender figure in the entrance. The temperature plummeted instantly, frost crystallizing across the stone floor in intricate patterns. The fallen angels froze, their expressions shifting from predatory to fearful. Grayfia Lucifuge, Calawarner breathed, the name falling from her lips like a death sentence. The woman who entered moved with liquid grace, her silver hair flowing down her back like mercury. Her eyes, steel gray and cold as midwinter, surveyed the scene with detached calculation. She wore what appeared to be a maid's uniform, though the quality and cut suggested something far more significant than domestic service. Fallen angels operating without sanction on neutral territory, she stated, her voice cultured and precise, carrying subtle notes of ancient authority. Attacking an unaffiliated human. Explain yourselves. Raynor recovered first, straightening her posture though her wings remained half spread for quick retreat. This doesn't concern the devils, Lucifuge. We're acting under orders from. Your orders are irrelevant, Grayfia interrupted, each word carrying the weight of glaciers. You've violated the non-aggression pact. Leave now, and I'll consider reporting this incident through diplomatic channels rather than solving it immediately. The threat hung in the air, unmistakable despite her measured tone. Issei, still on his knees and struggling with the energy coursing through him, sensed the power differential instantly. This woman, Grayfia, radiated such controlled strength. That the fallen angels, beings who had seemed invincible moments ago, now looked like children playing at violence. This isn't over, Raynor hissed, casting one last venomous glance at Issei. What's awakening in you will draw far worse than us. The fallen angels vanished through the shattered windows, their wing beats fading into the night. Only then did Grayfia turn her full attention to Issei, her expression inscrutable as she assessed the crimson energy still flickering across his skin. Fascinating, she murmured, approaching him with measured steps. The resonance pattern is unlike anything in our records. What is your name, human? Issei, he managed through gritted teeth. Issei Hyodo. What's happening to me? You're undergoing an awakening, she said, kneeling beside him with surprising grace. Up close, her beauty was almost painful to behold, perfect features carved from alabaster, those steel-gray eyes containing centuries of knowledge. Your human blood has been masking something else. Something much older. She extended a hand, hovering it over his chest without touching him. The air between them shimmered with interacting energies, his chaotic crimson against her controlled silver blue. The seal is fractured but holding, she observed. If it breaks completely here, the energy discharge could level this entire district. Can you stop it? Issei asked, fighting to maintain consciousness as another wave of foreign memories assaulted him. Grayfia's eyes narrowed slightly, the first real expression he'd seen from her. Yes, though it's merely delaying the inevitable. Your awakening has begun. I can only redirect the process, not halt it. She pressed her palm against his forehead, her touch cool against his burnier power flow into him, disciplined, ancient, and surprisingly gentle as it wrapped around the chaotic energy inside him, containing it without smothering it. Sleep, she commanded, and Issei found himself unable to resist. As darkness claimed him, the last thing he saw was Grayfia creating what appeared to be a communication circle in the air beside her, speaking words he couldn't quite grasp. Searsex, I've found something unexpected. The Immortal Throne may have chosen its heir. The Underworld's twilight sky cast perpetual crimson across the gleaming spires of Lilith, the capital city where demonic aristocracy had ruled for millennia. In the central district, the Lucifer Palace rose above all other structures, a monument to power built from black marble and adorned with sculptures depicting the Great Devil Rebellion. Within its highest tower, Grayfia Lucifuge stood before an ornate desk, her posture perfect as she delivered her report. The room's grandeur, vaulted ceilings, ancient tomes lining the walls, artifacts of immeasurable power displayed on pedestals, seemed at odds with the casual demeanor of its occupant. Searsex Lucifer, one of the four great Satans who governed Devil Society, Lu. Nged in his chair with a relaxed smile that belied his position. His crimson hair and handsome features gave him the appearance of a man in his late 20s, though he had lived for centuries. You're certain about this, Grayfia? He asked, his voice light yet unable to completely mask his concern. The prophecies regarding the Immortal Throne have been misinterpreted countless times. I've never felt power resonance like his. Grayfia replied, her tone professionally detached despite the implications of her discovery. The energy signature matches the ancient descriptions: crimson lightning, memory transference, spontaneous manifestation under duress, and the fallen angel's interest confirms something significant is occurring. Sears nodded, his casual posture shifting subtly as he leaned forward. Where is the boy now? Quote, in the neutral observation chamber beneath Kuo Academy. I've placed containment wards and assigned Okita to monitor him. The seal is stabilizing, but the power continues to build. It will break fully within days, perhaps hours. And his background, unremarkable by all appearances. 17 years old, average student at Kuo Academy, lives with his parents. No prior supernatural incidents or abilities. I've initiated a deeper investigation into his lineage. Sears rose from his chair and moved to the window, gazing out at the city his family had helped build. If he truly is the heir to the immortal throne, every faction will be hunting him, or seeking to control him. The old Satan faction will see him as a threat to our rule. The fallen angels clearly already know something. The angels will intervene once they sense the power signature. What would you have me do? Grayfia asked. Sears turned, his expression rarely serious. Return to the human world. Protect the boy, but do not bring him to the underworld yet. We need to understand what he is before we introduce such a volatile element into our political landscape. And, if other factions attempt to acquire him, use your judgment, Sears said, a ghost of a smile returning. Your judgment has always been impeccable, Grayfia. She bowed slightly, recognizing both the compliment and the dismissal. As she turned to leave, Sears added, and Grayfia, be careful. If the legends about the Immortal King are even partially true, you'll be guarding someone who could reshape our world, or destroy it entirely. Issei awakened to the scent of antiseptic and the soft beeping of medical equipment. He blinked, his vision focusing on an unfamiliar ceiling. The room around him was sparsely furnished. A bed, monitoring equipment, and bare white walls without windows. The only door appeared to be reinforced steel. A cell, he thought, disguised as a hospital room. His body felt strangely foreign, as if he'd grown new muscles overnight. The burning sensation had subsided, but in its place was an awareness of something lurking beneath his skin, power humming quietly, waiting to be called upon. The door opened, and Grayfia entered, carrying a tray with what appeared to be food and water. She had exchanged her maid uniform for something more practical, a tailored gray suit that somehow enhanced rather than diminished her regal bearing. You're awake, she observed, setting the tray on a small table beside his bed. How do you feel? Issei sat up slowly, testing his limbs. Different, like I've been rebuilt from the inside out. He met her gaze directly. You're not human. It wasn't a question, and Grayfia didn't treat it as one. No, I am a devil, specifically, Grayfia Lucifuge, Queen to Sears Lucifer, one of the 4 rulers of Devil Society. Her directness surprised him. That's unexpectedly honest. Lies would be counterproductive given what you're becoming. She replied, her expression neutral. Your awakening power would allow you to sense deception anyway. Issei processed this, finding himself remarkably calm considering the circumstances. Part of him felt like he should be panicking. He'd been attacked by fallen angels, rescued by a self-proclaimed devil, and now held in what amounted to a comfortable prison. Yet his mind remained clear, analytical. What am I becoming? He asked, the question that mattered most. Grayfia studied him for a moment before answering. There are signs that you may be the heir to what we call the Immortal Throne, a position of power prophesied to emerge when the supernatural world faces its greatest crisis. The Immortal King is said to be a sovereign who transcends the traditional boundaries between factions. That sounds like mythology, not reality, Issei said, though even as he spoke, fragments of memories not his own flickered through his mind. Ancient battlefields, CILS of beings with power beyond comprehension, a throne hewn from materials that existed between realities. The supernatural world is built on what humans consider mythology, Grayfia countered. Angels, devils, gods from various pantheons, we've existed alongside humanity since the beginning. The boundaries between our worlds have simply become more rigid over time. Issei nodded slowly, absorbing this. Then, with deliberate calm, He swung his legs over the side of the bed. I want to go home. My parents will be worried. Your parents believe you're staying with a friend for a school project. We've taken care of the mundane details. His eyes narrowed slightly. Mind control, a simple suggestion spell, Grayfia clarified. Temporary and harmless. Issei stood, surprised to find his legs steady beneath him. I still want to leave. Unless I'm a prisoner. Not a prisoner, she said, though her position subtly shifted to block the doorway. But your safety, and the safety of those around you, requires caution. The energy within you is volatile, unpredictable. When the seal breaks completely, the power discharge could harm anyone nearby. What seal? Issei asked, though as the words left his mouth. He felt it, a metaphysical construct wrapped around something vast within him, like paper trying to contain an ocean. Grayfia's eyes narrowed fractionally. You can sense it already. Interesting. She gestured to a chair. Sit. I'll explain what we know, and then we can discuss next steps. Against his better judgment, Issei found himself complying. There was something in her manner that commanded respect, not through intimidation but through sheer competence. She spoke with the confidence of someone who had navigated complex situations for centuries and emerged successful. The supernatural world exists in layers, Grayfia began, taking the seat opposite him. Heaven, the underworld, and various mythological realms overlapping with the human world. These realms are governed by different factions, angels led by the biblical god, devils under the four great satans, phallus other pantheons and species. She created a small magical diagram in the air between them, a complex model of interconnected realms rendered in silver light. For millennia, these factions have maintained an uneasy balance, particularly after the Great War that nearly destroyed all sides. But there are ancient prophecies, predating even the biblical factions, that speak of an immortal king who would emerge when the boundaries between realms begin to fail, a sovereign whose power would allow them to restructure these connections and prevent collapse. The diagram shifted, showing fracture lines appearing between the realms. We've detected these fractures in increasing numbers over the past century. The veil between realms is weakening. And now you appear, carrying an energy signature that matches the ancient descriptions of the immortal heir. Issei absorbed this silently, surprised by how readily he accepted her explanation. Part of him, the part that had been an ordinary high school student just days ago, wanted to dismiss it as fantasy. But another part, the part that aimed to be awakening with each passing hour, recognized the truth in her words. Why me? He finally asked. Unknown, Grayfia admitted. Your lineage appears human for several generations back. There must be something more distant. Something hidden. We're investigating. Issei stood again, restless energy building within him. And the fallen angels who attacked me. They knew something about this. Evidently. Which raises questions about their information sources. Grayfia rose as well, her movement fluid and graceful. Various factions will have different reactions to your emergence. Some will seek to control you. Others to destroy you before your power fully manifests. And the devils, what do they want with me? Grayfia's expression remained carefully neutral. That depends on the devil. Seers X Lucifer has instructed me to protect you while we determine the full implications of your awakening. Protection that looks remarkably like captivity, Issei observed, gesturing to the room around them. A flicker of something, perhaps respect, crossed Grayfia's features. A fair assessment. However, I believe you'll find the alternative less appealing. As if summoned by her words, a tremor ran through the building. Distant alarms began to sound. Grayfia's posture shifted instantly, her casual demeanor replaced by combat readiness. It seems, she said, her voice cooling several degrees, that someone has discovered your location sooner than anticipated. Issei felt it too, a pressure in the air, the sense of multiple powerful beings converging on their location. More fallen angels? No, Grayfia replied, moving toward the door. Something worse. Descendants of the original Satans who believe they should rule the underworld. If they've come personally rather than sending agents, they consider you a significant threat, or opportunity. She waved her hand, and her casual clothing dissolved, replaced by her formal maid attire. The transformation seemed odd to Issei until he noticed subtle runes woven into the fabric, glowing faintly with suppressed power. Stay behind me, she instructed. I'll create an exit path. Another explosion rocked the facility, closer this time. Dust sifted down from the ceiling as cracks appeared in the walls. Issei's pulse quickened, but the panic he expected didn't come. Instead, his mind began calculating, assessing the structural integrity of their location. Mapping potential escape routes, analyzing the limited information he had about their attackers. "They'll expect us to retreat," he said, the words emerging before he'd fully processed the thought. "If this facility has multiple exits, they'll have them covered. Better to move toward them selectively, find the weakest point in their formation, and break through where they don't anticipate." Grayfia paused, giving him an appraising look. "An aggressive strategy. Sometimes the safest path goes through the center of danger," Issei replied, surprising himself with the conviction in his voice. A ghost of a smile touched Grayfia's lips. "Perhaps there is something to these prophecies after all." She gestured toward the door. "After you, then. But remember, these are devils from the old Satan faction. Their power has been honed through centuries of conflict. While I'm just discovering mine," Issei acknowledged. "I'll follow your lead in combat." The facility around them was in chaos as they emerged from the room. What Issei had taken for a small medical unit revealed itself as an extensive underground complex. Devil guards in military-style uniforms rushed through corridors. Some wounded, others shouting orders. Sections of ceiling had collapsed, and the air smelled of smoke and something sulfurous. Grayfia moved with purpose, her eyed confident as she navigated the labyrinth. Devils they passed straightened respectfully despite the crisis, some appearing awestruck at her presence. Issei followed closely, cataloging details, security protocols, defensive formations. The hierarchical structure evident even in emergency response. They reached what appeared to be a central command hub just as another explosion tore through the far wall. Through the smoke and debris stepped a figure that radiated malevolence, a tall, aristocratic man with silver hair and eyes like frozen blood. His power signature felt corrupted somehow, as something pure had been twisted into wrongness. "Grayfia Lucifuge," he said, his voice carrying unnatural harmonics. "Still playing servant to the false Lucifer, I see. How the mighty have fallen." Around him materialized a dozen devils in ornate battle armor, their faces concealed behind helmets shaped like grotesque demons. "Risvam," Grayfia replied, her tone dropping to dangerous temperatures. "I thought you were still hiding in the shadows, too cowardly to show your face." The man, Risvam, laughed, the sound grating against Issei's senses. "When the heir to the immortal throne appears, even I must take a personal interest." His gaze shifted to Issei, eyes narrowing. "Such an unremarkable vessel for such remarkable power. Tell me, boy, has Grayfia explained what you're becoming? Or what the devils will do once your usefulness ends?" Grayfia stepped forward, ice crystallizing in the air around her. He won't be listening to the manipulations of a snake who betrayed his own kind. His own kind. Risvim's smile widened unnaturally. "Oh, but the boy isn't one of us, is he? The immortal king transcends our petty factions. He belongs to all realms, and none of them." The air pressure changed as Grayfia gathered her power. Issei could feel it, pure magical energy condensing around her in patterns of frightening complexity. The temperature plummeted until their breath fogged in the air. "Leave," she commanded, "or I will remind you why the Lucifuge clan was feared even before we served the Lucifers." Risvim's expression hardened, the false joviality vanishing. "You've grown overconfident, Grayfia. You face not only me but the combined might of the true heirs to Devil legacy." He gestured, and his accompanying devils stepped forward, magical circles forming around their hands. The pressure in the room intensified as multiple power signatures flared simultaneously. Issei felt something shift inside him, the seal containing his power straining as if responding to the threat. Ancient instincts whispered strategies in his mind, evaluated threats, identified weaknesses in the enemy formation. His vision sharpened, revealing magical currents he'd never perceived before. "Grayfia," he said quietly. "The one on the far left is maintaining a transportation circle. They're planning to teleport me away once they neutralize you." Her eyes flickered to him in momentary surprise before returning to the threat. "How can you?" She stopped, reassessing. "Can you see their magical structures?" "Yes," Issei replied, fascinated by the complex geometries of power surrounding each devil. The patterns are interesting, she murmured, before addressing Riasvem again. You've miscalculated by coming here personally. This facility is under Searzek's direct protection. Searzek is occupied with a situation in the Eastern Territories, Riasvem smirked. A situation we arranged specifically to keep him distracted. He won't arrive in time to save you, or claim the boy. Grayfia's expression didn't change, but Issei sensed her concern through subtle fluctuations in her magical aura. This threat was significant, perhaps beyond her ability to counter alone. The seal within Issei pulsed painfully, responding to his heightened emotions. Power pushed against its constraints, seeking release. He could feel it building, uncontrolled yet, but vast in its potential. Don't fight it, a voice whispered in his mind, not his own, yet somehow familiar. The seal was never meant to hold permanently. It was meant to prepare you. Riasvem raised his hand, dark energy gathering around his fingertips. Enough talk. Restrain the queen. The boy comes with us. The armored devils surged forward. Grayfia responded instantly, the air around her solidifying into deadly ice shards that launched toward their attackers. 3 devils fell immediately, impaled by projectiles that bypassed their magical defenses through sheer speed. The remaining forces split, half Enga, Jing Grayfia while others moved toward Issei. The room erupted into magical combat, fire, lightning, and darker energies colliding in destructive patterns. Grayfia moved with incredible speed and precision, her ice magic creating barriers and weapons simultaneously. Yet Issei could see she was strategically disadvantaged, outnumbered, fighting defensively to protect him while her opponents could focus solely on offense. Riasvem remained back, watching the conflict with calculated interest, occasionally directing his forces with subtle gestures. A female devil with flame-wreathed hands broke through Grayfia's defensive perimeter. Lunging toward Issei with unnatural speed. Acting on instinct rather than thought, Issei sidestepped, his body moving with precision he'd never possessed before. He devil's momentum carried her past him, her surprise evident even behind her helmet. He shouldn't be able to move like that, she hissed, pivoting for another attack. Issei felt his perception shifting further, time seeming to slow around him. The combat patterns became clear, predictable even. When the devil attacked again, he not only evaded but countered, his hand catching her wrist and redirecting her momentum. She crashed into a nearby console, magical flames extinguishing as she gasped in pain. How? She began, before Grayfia's ice encased her completely. Issei, Grayfia called, her voice steady despite maintaining complex magical combat against multiple opponents. We need to retreat. Head toward the eastern corridor when I create an opening. But retreat felt wrong to Issei. The seal within him pulsed again, more insistently. Power leaked through the weakening constraints, flowing into his muscles, sharpening his senses further. Ancient knowledge unfurled in his mind, combat techniques, magical principles. Strategic philosophies developed over countless conflicts. No, he said, his voice carrying unexpected resonance. We don't run. The seal cracked further, and crimson energy began to shimmer around his body. Riasvem's eyes widened, his composure slipping for the first time. Contain him now, he shouted to his forces. The awakening is accelerating. 2 devils broke off from engaging Grayfia, redirecting their attack toward Issei. They launched binding spells, glowing chains of magical energy designed to restrain power rather than physical form. Issei raised his hand instinctively. The crimson energy surrounding him condensed around his palm, then expanded outward in a wave that shattered the binding spells like glass. The backlash sent the devils staggering backward. Impossible, one whispered. Those were Phoenix-derived bindings. The seal fractured further. Memories cascaded through Issei's mind, lifetimes of experience, knowledge accumulated across epochs. The power within him wasn't simply energy, it was history, perspective, wisdom distilled from centuries of observation. Grayfia disengaged from her opponents, moving to his side with fluid grace. Issei, your awakening is happening too quickly. You need to control it, channel it deliberately. I know, he replied, though the knowledge came from somewhere beyond his 17 years of life. Stand with me, Grayfia Lucifuge. This ends now. She studied him for a heartbeat, then nodded, reading something in his expression that convinced her. They turned together to face Riasvim and his remaining forces. "The boy is already lost to you," Riasvim said, though uncertainty had crept into his voice. "Even if you defeat us here, others will come. The fallen angels, the old Satan faction, even Sirzex will eventually see him as a threat to devil autonomy." "Perhaps," Issei acknowledged, the crimson energy around him stabilizing into coherent patterns. "But that's tomorrow's problem." He extended his hand, and the energy responded, condensing into a blade of pure power. The movement felt natural, as if he'd performed it countless times before. Grayfia's ice magic synchronized with his crimson energy, the two powers intertwining without conflict. Riasvim's forces hesitated, sensing the shift in battlefield dynamics. Their leader's expression darkened as he reassessed the situation. "A strategic withdrawal seems prudent," he said after a moment. "But remember, boy, what awakens in you will change everything. The question is whether you'll control it, or it will control you." A transportation circle appeared beneath him and his remaining forces. Grayfia moved to disrupt it, but Issei placed a hand on her arm. "Let them go," he said quietly. "This was just the first wave. We need to prepare for what comes next." Riasvim's lips curled into a final smirk before he vanished, taking his forces with him. The sudden absence of hostile energy left the RO's feeling strangely empty despite the destruction surrounding them. Grayfia turned to Issei, her composed expression unable to completely mask her curiosity. "You fought like a trained warrior. And you made a strategic decision to allow their retreat rather than forcing a conclusive battle." "It felt right," Issei said, watching as the crimson energy around him gradually receded. The seal had stabilized again, though it was significantly weaker than before. "There was no advantage in pursuing them when we don't know their full strength or resources." "A mature assessment," she acknowledged. "Though not what I'd expect from someone your age." Issei met her gaze. "I'm not entirely myself anymore, am I? These memories, this knowledge, they're coming from whatever was sealed inside me." "The essence of the Immortal King," Grayfia confirmed. "According to the ancient texts, the power doesn't simply grant strength, it carries the accumulated wisdom of previous incarnations. The throne has existed since before recorded history, though it has rarely been claimed." The implications were staggering. Issei looked down at his hands, outwardly unchanged yet now capable of channeling forces beyond human comprehension. "What happens now?" "Now," Grayfia said, straightening her attire with a gesture that seemed incongruously domestic given the circumstances, "we report to Sirzex Lucifer. The old Satan faction's direct involvement escalates matters considerably. And after that," her expression softened fractionally, so slightly he might have imagined it. "After that, we begin your training. The seal will continue to weaken regardless of what we do. Better you learn to control what emerges than be controlled by it." Issei nodded, feeling the weight of her words. The ordinary life he'd known was slipping away with each passing moment, replaced by something both ancient and new. Part of him mourned that loss, while another part, growing stronger by the Hoange homecoming in these changes. "I'm ready," he said, and was surprised to find he meant it. Kuo town slumbered beneath a blanket of stars, its citizens unaware of the supernatural drama unfolding in their midst. On the roof of Kuo Academy, Issei sat cross-legged, eyes closed in meditation as Grayfia instructed him in the basics of magical control. 3 days had passed since the confrontation with Riasvim. 3 days of intensive training, of gradually accepting the transformation occurring within him. The seal continued to weaken, but in controlled conditions, allowing him to adapt to each new surge of power and memory. "Focus on the boundary between your human self and the awakening energy," Grayfia instructed, her voice calm and measured. "Don't resist it, but don't surrender to it either. Find the balance point where the two can coexist." Issei visualized the internal landscape she described, his 17 years of human experience forming one shore, the vast ocean of the Immortal King's essence forming another. Between them, a boundary that shifted with each breath, sometimes threatening to drown his identity, other times receding to a distant tide. "The memories are becoming clearer," he said, maintaining his meditative state. "Not just fragments now, complete experiences, knowledge, perspectives. Can you access them deliberately?" Grayfia asked. Issei concentrated, reaching toward a specific aspect of the ancient knowledge. "Yes, it's like opening doors in a vast library. Each door leads to different expertise, combat techniques, magical theory, languages I've never studied. And the emotional components, the personality aspects. This was trickier. Issei probed deeper, examining how the awakening affected his core self. My basic nature remains, but it's expanded, enhanced. I still value what I valued before, care about what I cared about. But there's a broader perspective now, a longer view of consequences. Grayfia nodded, though he couldn't see it with his eyes closed. That aligns with the historical accounts. The Immortal King isn't a possession or replacement of the host but a synergy, the host's unique qualities combined with ancient power and knowledge. Issei opened his eyes, the meditation complete for now. The night air felt crisp against his skin, carrying the scents of the town below, cooking food, automobile exhaust, flowering trees. His enhanced senses could distinguish each component, creating a complex olfactory map of his surroundings. Sears seemed concerned when we reported to him, he observed, rising to his feet with fluid grace. Not just about the old Satan faction's involvement, but about me specifically. Grayfia's expression revealed nothing, but Issei was learning to read the subtle fluctuations in her magical aura, the equivalent of micro-expressions for beings of power. Sears understands the implications better than most, she said carefully. The Immortal King isn't subject to the normal hierarchies of supernatural society. According to prophecy, your authority would transcend even that of the biblical god or the great Satans. Making me a potential threat to the current power structure, Issei concluded. To some eyes, yes. Though Sears is more progressive than most devil leaders. He recognizes that the weakening of the veil between realms requires unprecedented solutions. Issei walked to the edge of the roof, looking out over the town he'd called home his entire life. It appeared different now through his awakening senses, the magical currents flowing beneath streets, the subtle wardings around certain buildings, the occasional flicker of supernatural beings moving through human spaces. There will be more attempts to capture or kill me, he said, not a question but a statement of fact. Without doubt, Grayfia confirmed, moving to stand beside him. The fallen angels have been unusually quiet since the initial attack, which suggests they're planning something significant. The old Satan faction will regroup and try again with greater forces. Various other factions will make their moves once word spreads further. Then we should take the initiative rather than waiting for them, Issei said. The strategy forming naturally in his mind. I need to establish connections, build alliances before I'm seen solely as a threat or prize to be claimed. Grayfia studied him with renewed interest. That's surprisingly political thinking for someone your age. Not my age anymore, Issei replied with a small smile. Not entirely. The memories include centuries of diplomatic experience, negotiation strategies, alliance building across factions. What do you propose? Issei turned to face her fully. First, I need to understand the current political landscape in detail, beyond the basic overview you've provided. Then I need to meet key figures from various factions, beginning with devil societies since that's where your connections are strongest. His expression grew more serious. But most importantly, I need to complete my awakening under controlled circumstances, not in the middle of combat or while under attack. The fractured seal is becoming nervous, splintering rather than dissolving cleanly. Grayfia nodded, her analytical mind clearly processing the logic of his proposal. The controlled awakening will be challenging. The power surge old attract attention from every supernatural faction within hundreds of miles. Then we need a location that's both secure and remote, Issei said. And we need to accelerate my training before then. I've barely touched the surface of what I can apparently do. There are facilities in the Underworld that would serve the purpose, Grayfia suggested. Though bringing you there carries its own risks. Politically, you mean? How would other devil factions react to my presence? Some would see it as Sears claiming you as an asset, Grayfia explained. Others would view it as an opportunity to eliminate you in devil territory, where outside factions couldn't interfere easily. Issei considered this, weighing options with a clarity that still surprised him. What about neutral territory, the boundary regions between realms? Grayfia's eyebrows rose slightly, the equivalent of overt shock for her controlled demeanor. You're aware of the boundary regions already. The knowledge is there, Issei tapped his temple. Places where realms overlap, where the normal rules of dimensional separation thin. They're dangerous, unpredictable, but also beyond the direct control of any single faction. There is one such location that might serve, Grayfia said slowly. A nexus point in the mountains north of here, where human world, underworld, and several mythological domains converge. It's naturally unstable, which paradoxically makes it ideal for containing an energy surge. The ambient chaos would help mask your power signature. How soon can we arrange it? 3 days, she replied after brief consideration. I'll need to consult with Searsex, prepare appropriate protective measures, and ensure we're not followed. Issei nodded, his gaze returning to the town below. 3 days. He could feel the seal shifting within him, fragile as cracked glass. It will hold that long. Barely. Until then, we continue your training, Grayfia said. Focus on control rather than power enhancement. The raw strength will come when the seal breaks. What you need is the discipline to direct it. A comfortable silence fell between them as they gazed out at the night. Despite the circumstances, or perhaps because of them, Issei felt a strange kinship developing with this ancient, powerful being who had been thrust into the role of his protector and teacher. Grayfia, he said after a moment. The texts you mentioned, about the Immortal King, what do they say about his purpose? Why does this power exist at all? She considered the question carefully before answering. The oldest accounts are cryptic, as ancient texts tend to be. They and natural forces fail, but there are more specific prophecies about the current awakening, such as, the current age is said to be one of unraveling boundaries, the veil between realms weakening as supernatural factions become increasingly isolated from each other. The prophecies suggest the Immortal King emerges to reforge connections, to create new pathways between realms before complete collapse occurs. Issei absorbed this, feeling the weight of expectation settling on his shoulders. That's a substantial responsibility for someone who was worried about math exams a week ago. The faintest smile touched Grayfia's lips. Indeed, though from what I've observed, you're adapting remarkably well. I don't have much choice, do I? Issei said, though without bitterness. Besides, part of me, the part that's awakening, has been preparing for this role for centuries. That part will become increasingly dominant as the seal weakens, Grayfia cautioned. Many hosts of great power lose themselves in the process. I won't, Issei said with quiet certainty. Whatever I'm becoming, it will include who I am now, not replace it. Grayfia studied him with those ancient, perceptive eyes. Then you may indeed be worthy of the throne, Issei Hyodo. Before he could respond, a ripple passed through the magical fiel D surrounding the academy, a subtle disturbance that both of them sensed simultaneously. Their postures shifted in unison, alert to potential threat. Someone's testing the boundary wards, Grayfia observed, her casual demeanor replaced by combat readiness. Issei extended his senses, reading the magical disturbance with growing skill. Not attacking, though, more like observing, analyzing. Yes, Grayfia agreed, sounding faintly impressed. A sophisticated technique, too. Few beings could probe this delicately without triggering alarms. The disturbance shifted, focusing on different sections of the perimeter in methodical sequence. Issei tracked the pattern, recognition dawning. It's devil magic, he said, but different from yours or the old Satan faction. More structured, academically precise. Grayfia's eyes narrowed. Interesting description. And accurate. She created a small magical circle with a gesture, sending out a pulse of energy that intersected with the disturbance. As I suspected, House Gremory's signature. Gremory, related to Searsex, his sister, most likely. Rias Gremory is the assigned devil administrator for this territory. She must have detected the unusual energy patterns from your training. The probing ceased abruptly, replaced by a formal request pattern, a standardized magical signature requesting communication. Should we respond? Issei asked. Grayfia considered briefly before nodding. Better to establish controlled contact than risk misunderstanding. Rias Gremory is politically significant, heir to one of the 72 pillars of devil nobility. If she's investigating personally rather than sending servants, she considers this matter important. She expanded the communication circle, establishing a connection. A moment later, a holographic image formed in the air before them, a young woman with flowing crimson hair, striking blue-green eyes, and features that combined aristocratic refinement with natural beauty. She wore what appeared to be a school uniform, though her bearing suggested someone far older than a typical student. Grayfia Lucifuge, the woman said, her tone formal yet carrying undercurrents of surprise. I didn't expect to find Sirzek's queen operating in my territory without notification. Lady Rias, Grayfia replied with equal formality. The circumstances required discretion. I apologize for the oversight in protocol. Rias Gremory's gaze shifted to Issei, her eyes narrowing slightly as she assessed him. And this would be the source of the unusual energy signature I've been detecting for the past 3 days. Human, yet, not entirely. This is Issei Hyodo, Grayfia said. The situation surrounding him is complex and sensitive. Clearly, Rias replied dryly. Complex enough to warrant the personal attention of the strongest queen in the underworld, yet not important enough to inform the devil responsible for this territory. Issei stepped forward before Grayfia could respond. The oversight was necessary for security reasons, Lady Gremory. Multiple factions are already moving to either capture or eliminate me. Limiting knowledge of my presence was a tactical decision, not a political slight. Rias' expression registered surprise at his articulate response, clearly not what she'd expected from a human teenager. Her gaze sharpened, reassessing him with greater attention. You speak like someone familiar with devil politics, Issei Hyodo. I'm learning quickly, he replied with a small smile. Rias studied him a moment longer before addressing Grayfia again. Quote, I believe I deserve a complete explanation. Perhaps in person rather than via communication circle. Grayfia glanced at Issei, who nodded subtly. Establishing a relationship with devil nobility, Espec. I ally someone connected to Sirzek's, aligned with his emerging strategy. Agreed, Grayfia said, though we should maintain security protocols. Would you be willing to come alone? Of course, Rias replied, a touch of haughtiness entering her tone. I'll arrive in 10 minutes. The communication circle closed, her image dissolving into particles of light. She's younger than I expected, Issei observed. Or appears younger, at least. Quote, Rias Gremory is young by devil standards, barely a century old, Grayfia confirmed. But she's highly intelligent and politically astute. Her assignment to his territory is partly nepotism due to her relationship with Sirzek's, but she's proven capable in her own right. How much should we tell her? Grayfia considered. Enough to ensure her cooperation, but not everything. The full implications of the Immortal throne would be politically destabilizing if widely known. For now, we present you as a human with awakening powers of unusual nature, protection while we determine their origin and purpose. Issei nodded in agreement, a partial truth that serves immediate needs without revealing strategic information. Practical. Grayfia gave him another of those evaluating looks that had become familiar over the past days. Your thinking continues to evolve rapidly. The strategic aspects of the Immortal King's memories seem particularly accessible to you. It feels natural, Issei acknowledged. The combat instincts emerge under threat, but the strategic thinking is constant. Like it's harmonizing with my natural thought patterns rather than overriding them. Their conversation paused as they sensed a magical disturbance, a transportation circle forming at the far end of the roof. Crimson light coalesced into a complex pattern. N of arcane symbols before Rias Gremory stepped through, the circle dissolving behind her. In person, she projected an aura of confidence and power that her holographic image hadn't fully captured. Her appearance suggested a young woman of perhaps 18, her magical presence spoke of significantly greater age and experience. She carried herself with the assurance of nobility, her gaze erect and evaluating as she approached them. Lady Rias, Grayfia greeted her with a formal inclination of her head. Grayfia, Rias returned the greeting before turning her attention to Issei. And Issei Hyodo, I've been sensing unusual energy patterns throughout Kuo for days now. I assumed it might be fallen angel activity until I traced it here and found you. Her direct gaze held a mix of curiosity and caution. Issei met it steadily, allowing her to form her initial impressions while he did the same. She was powerful, not at Grayfia's level, but formidable nonetheless. Her magical signature suggested fire affinity and power of destruction, controlled with precision that spoke of extensive training. What exactly are you? She asked bluntly. Your aura reads as human, yet contains Eleantered before. That, Issei replied with a slight smile, is precisely what we're working to understand. Grayfia stepped forward, taking control of the conversation. Issei appears to be connected to an ancient power source that predates current supernatural classifications. His awakening has attracted attention from multiple factions, including the Old Satan faction. Rias' eyebrows rose. The Old Satan faction made a move in my territory. When, 3 days ago, an incursion led by Riasvam Lucifer himself. That clearly surprised Rias. Riasvam came personally. Then whatever power is awakening in him must be significant indeed. She studied Issei with renewed interest. Is he being recruited for a peerage? Is that why you're here, Grayfia? No, Issei answered before Grayfia could. My path appears to be independent of traditional devil structures. Searsx has authorized protective measures while we determine the full nature of his awakening, Grayfia added. We'll be relocating soon to a more secure location for the final transition. Rias paced slowly, processing this information. I should have been informed immediately when the Old Satan faction violated my territory. Protocol demands. Protocol would have placed you in direct conflict with Riasvam, Issei interrupted, his tone respectful but firm. A conflict you weren't prepared for. Aphia's presence here is what prevented casualties. Rias stopped pacing, her eyes narrowing at his assessment. You presume to evaluate my combat capabilities, human. I presume to recognize Riasvam Lucifer's reputation. Issei countered smoothly, and to appreciate that Grayfia's decision prioritized effectiveness over protocol. A tense moment passed before Rias' expression softened slightly, acknowledging the logic of his point. Fair enough, though I maintain I should have been informed after the fact. A valid criticism, Grayfia conceded. The situation has developed rapidly, requiring constant adaptation. Rias turned to her. And now, what are your plans for him? As I mentioned, relocation to complete his awakening under controlled conditions. After that, much depends on what precisely he becomes. Rias studied Issei again, her analytical gaze taking in details, his posture, the controlled flow of power beneath his surface, the way he met her gaze with neither submission nor challenge but calm evaluation. Whatever you're becoming, she said directly to him, it's changing you already. Your magical signature shifts even as we speak, human patterns interweaving with something far older. Issei nodded. I feel it, knowledge and power emerging from somewhere beyond my 17 years of life. Dangerous, Rias observed. Many who undergo such transformations lose themselves entirely. So I've been told, Issei replied with a glance toward Grayfia. But I intend to integrate rather than be replaced. Something in his tone, the quiet confidence, perhaps, seemed to intrigue Rias. She stepped closer, her magical aura extending subtly to interact with his. Issei allowed it, maintaining his composure as her power brushed against his like fingers testing the texture of fabric. Fascinating, she murmured. Your core remains distinctly human, yet there's something else, something ancient harmonizing with it rather than overwhelming it. She stepped back. I want to be involved in this. Grayfia's expression remained neutral. That would require Searsx's approval. Then get it, Rias replied, a touch of noble entitlement entering her voice. This is my territory. More importantly, whatever he's becoming could affect all Devil Society. As heir to House Gremory, I have both right and responsibility to observe. Issei found himself admiring her directness. The way she leveraged both territorial authority and familial connection to insert herself into the situation. It was a skilled political maneuver disguised as righteous indignation. I have no objection, he said, earning surprised looks from both women. Lady Gremory's involvement could be advantageous. As territorial administrator, she can provide cover for our activities and additional security against further incursions. Grayfia gave him a measured look. You're thinking politically. Good, but remember that every new person aware of your status increases operational complexity. And decreases operational secrecy, Issei acknowledged. But selective alliance building needs to begin somewhere. House Gremory is politically significant without being directly aligned. With factions already moving against me. Rias watched this exchange with evident fascination. You speak like a devil strategist, not a human teenager. As I said, Issei replied with a slight smile, I'm changing. After a moment's consideration, Grayfia nodded. I'll contact Searsex. Given your territorial rights and house standing, he'll likely approve your involvement, with appropriate security measures. Excellent, Rias said, satisfaction evident in her tone. Then perhaps you can explain exactly what he's becoming that has Rias Lucifuge personally involved. Grayfia and Issei exchanged glances. A silent communication passing between them. Grayfia gave a nearly imperceptible nod. What do you know? Issei asked carefully, about the immortal throne. Rias' confident expression faltered. Genuine surprise breaking through her composed exterior. The immortal? She stopped, reassessing him with new intensity. That's impossible. The immortal king is a myth, a store. Why told to young devils about the pre-faction era? Many myths have foundations in truth, Grayfia observed. Particularly in our world. But the immortal throne has been empty for millennia, Rias argued. Some scholars doubt it ever existed outside of allegory. Yet here we are, Issei said quietly. With Rias Lucifuge personally attacking a human teenager, and Grayfia Lucifuge serve. Ing as my protector rather than eliminating a potential threat to Devil Society. Rias' gaze darted between them, her quick mind processing implications. If you truly are the heir to the immortal throne. She didn't finish the thought. But the political ramifications were evident in her expression. Then supernatural politics becomes considerably more complicated, Issei completed for her. Which is why discretion remains essential until my awakening completes. When? Rias asked, practical despite her evident shock. 3 days, Grayfia answered. We're arranging for a controlled awa. Kenning at a nexus point in the northern mountains. Rias straightened, decision made. I'm coming with you, not just as an observer, as active support. My power of destruction could help contain energy surges during the transition. Again, Issei found himself appreciating her quick strategic adaptation. Rather than retreating from potentially destabilizing information, she immediately positioned herself as an ally, ensuring both access to developing events and potential influence over their outcome. Your assistance would be valuable, he acknowledged. Though the risk to you personally would be significant. I'm heir to House Gremory, she replied with quiet pride. We don't shy from significant moments in history. Her gaze met his directly. And if you truly are becoming the immortal king, this is perhaps the most significant moment in supernatural history for millennia. The weight of her words settled over them, emphasizing the gravity of what was unfolding. Issei felt the seal within him pulse in response. As if the power it contained recognized the truth in her statement. 3 days, he repeated, his voice gaining resonance from the awakening power. Then we'll know or certain what I'm becoming, and what it means for all realms. Rias Gremory nodded, her expression resolute. 3 days to prepare for the emergence of a sovereign that transcends faction boundaries. I suspect they will be the last normal days any of us experience for quite some time. As if punctuating her words, the seal within Issei pulsed again. Rimson energy briefly outlined his form before receding. The message was clear, the power would not be contained much longer. The final awakening approached, ready to transform not just Issei Hyodo, but the very foundations of supernatural society. The 3 figures stood on the moonlit roof, each contemplating the approaching transformation from their own perspective, Grayfia with cautious preparation, Rias with strategic calculation, and Issei with the strange calm of someone standing at the threshold of destiny, recognizing the path even as he walked it for the first time. Chapter 1 End Chapter 2, Trials of Blood and Oath. Dawn broke over the northern mountains, painting jagged peaks in hues of amber and gold. Here, 30 miles from the nearest human settlement, the air thinned and reality itself grew malleable. Issei stood at the edge of a cliff, watching the sunrise with eyes that perceived far more than visible light. The boundary between worlds shimmered around him, a gossamer veil rippling with arcane currents. Beautiful, isn't it? He said without turning. The way the realms overlap here. Grayfia approached silently, her footsteps leaving no impression in the frost-covered ground. You can see the boundaries already. More clearly with each hour. Issei gestured toward what appeared to be empty air. There, that's where the underworld bleeds through. And there, that shimmer of silver. That's Alfheim, isn't it? The realm of light elves. Yes, Grayfia confirmed, mild surprise coloring her voice. Most beings require ritual preparations to perceive realm boundaries, even at nexus points like this. Issei smiled faintly. The seal continues to weaken. The knowledge comes in waves now, not just fragments but complete understandings. The 3 days of preparation had passed quickly. Searsex had approved their plan, providing resources while maintaining official distance, a political calculation that protected both Issei and Devil leadership from accusations of collusion. Rias had joined their small group, her initial wariness gradually shifting toward cautious respect as she observed Issei's accelerating transformation. "Are the preparations complete?" Issei asked, finally turning from the view. Grayfia nodded. "The containment circle is established. Lady Rias is finalizing the barrier harmonics now." They walked together along the narrow ridge toward a natural plateau that had been transformed overnight. Complex magical circles covered the flat stone surface, layered in concentric patterns that glowed with power. At the center stood Rias Gremory, her crimson hair dancing in the mountain breeze as she meticulously adjusted a final array of symbols. She straightened as they approached, her expression serious. "The resonance patterns are aligned. We can begin when you're ready." Issei studied the magical construct with new understanding. 3 days ago, such complex thaumaturgy would have appeared as meaningless symbols. Now he read the intricate spell work easily, a kanta, immense system designed to channel and redirect the massive energy discharge his awakening would produce. "You've incorporated northern runic elements," he observed, indicating a section of the outer circle. "That's unusual in devil magic." Quote. Rias raised an eyebrow, not bothering to hide her surprise. "Yes. The Norse patterns are particularly effective for energy containment in boundary regions." "How did you know that?" "The knowledge just appears," Issei replied, tracing a symbol with his fingertip. "Like memories I'm only now accessing. The Immortal King's essence continues to integrate with his consciousness." Grayfia explained. "The process accelerates as the seal weakens." Rias studied Issei with scholarly interest. "Is your original personality remaining intact?" The historical accounts of power awakening often describe the host being subsumed. "I'm still me," Issei said, meeting her gaze. "But me is expanding. I remember being a normal high school student with ordinary concerns. Those memories feel recent yet somehow distant, like childhood recollections. Clear, but belonging to an earlier version of myself." "Fascinating," Rias murmured. "Most transformative processes either preserve the original consciousness or replace it entirely. This integration is unusual." "The immortal throne is different," Grayfia interjected. "According to the ancient texts, it's EKS synthesis rather than dominance, the unique qualities of each heir combined with accumulated wisdom." Issei moved to the center of the complex array, feeling the magical currents swirling around him. "We should begin. The seal is fracturing more rapidly now. Better to control the process than have it happen spontaneously." The two women exchanged glances before nodding in agreement. They took positions at cardinal points around the outer circle, their magical energies flowing into the prepared structures. The array illuminated fully, layers of protection and containment activating in precise sequence. "Once we start, there's no stopping the awakening," Grayfia cautioned. "Are you certain you're ready?" Issei closed his eyes, examining the deteriorating seal within his consciousness. What had once been a solid barrier was now a crumbling structure, held together by willpower more than inherent strength. "Yes," he said, opening his eyes. "I'm ready." Grayfia nodded once, then began speaking in an ancient language, words of power that resonated with the fundamental structures of reality. The air thickened as dimensional barriers thinned, creating a space between spaces where catastrophic energy discharge could be contained without damaging the surrounding realms. Rias joined the incantation, her power of destruction carefully controlled and redirected to break down the artificial constraints without harming the essence they contained. Crimson energy flowed from her hands into the array, seeking the weakening seal within Issei. The effect was immediate and intense. Issei gasped as Rias's power connected with the seal, accelerating its controlled dissolution. Images flooded his mind, not random fragments now but structured experiences. Memories of ancient courts beings of impossible power debated cosmic principles. Battlefields where reality itself was a weapon. Quiet moments of contemplation in gardens that existed between dimensions. He fell to his knees as the memories intensified, his body struggling to contain the expanding consciousness. The crimson energy that had manifested in bursts before now enveloped him completely, spiraling upward in a olim of power that stretched toward the sky. The containment array glowed white-hot, channeling and redistributing energy that would otherwise have torn a hole between dimensions. His power signature is changing. Rias called over the growing maelstrom. The human pattern is still present, but it's being overlaid with something I've never encountered before. Grayfia maintained her focus on the containment spell, her voice calm despite the strain evident in her posture. The awakening approaches the critical threshold. Strengthen the northern quadrant, the energy flows are intensifying there. Within the eye of this magical storm, Issei experienced a moment of perfect clarity. The fragmentary knowledge coalesced into cohesive understanding, not just information but wisdom accumulated across epochs. He perceived connections between realms, the intricate web of reality that bound all existence together, and his unique position within that cosmic architecture. Then something unexpected occurred. The power swirling around him condensed suddenly, forming into three distinct entities, shadowy figures that solidified into humanoid forms. Their features were indistinct save for eyes. Chi glowed with internal light, one pair golden, one silver, one deepest obsidian. The arbiters, Issei whispered, recognition flowing from the ancient memories. Outside the central circle, Grayfia's composure finally broke. Impossible, she breathed. The arbiters are mythological construct. What's happening? Rias demanded, struggling to maintain her portion of the containment field as power. Levels spiked beyond predicted parameters. The three figures circled Issei, their movements synchronized like dancers performing an ancient ritual. When they spoke, their voices overlapped in harmonic resonance. Heir to the vacant throne, they intoned, you stand at the threshold of sovereignty. But power without worthiness brings only ruin. You must be tested. Issei rose to his feet, somehow unsurprised by this development. Deep within the emerging memories, he had known this moment would come, the final guardians of the immortal throne, appearing to test each potential heir. I accept your challenge, he replied, his voice carrying new resonance. The first figure, eyes gleaming gold, stepped forward. I am memory, keeper of what was. To claim the throne, you must prove you understand its origins and purpose. The second figure, silver-eyed, moved beside the first. I am judgment, arbiter of what is. You must demonstrate wisdom in applying power to present circumstances. The third, with eyes of depthless black, completed the trinity. I am vision, guardian of what may be. Show me you can perceive beyond immediate concerns to guide all realms toward harmony. Together, their voices merged again. 3 trials await. Success brings awakening and sovereignty. Failure means destruction, not just of your mortal form but of the power you would claim. The immortal throne will remain vacant until another worthy heir emerges. The containment array pulsed as reality shifted around them. The mountain plateau dissolved, replaced by swirling mist that gradually coalesced into a new environment. Grayfia and Rias remained visible at the edges of Issei's perception, maintaining the containment field but now separated from him by more than physical distance. We begin, the arbiters declared as one. With the trial of blood. The mist solidified into a vast chamber unlike anything in modern architecture. Columns of polished obsidian rose to dizzying heights, supporting a ceiling that appeared to be liquid darkness in constant motion. The floor beneath Issei's feet was translucent crystal, revealing flowing rivers of what appeared to be magma far below. The first court, he whispered. Recognition flowing from the awakening memories. Where the original compact between realms was signed. Memory stepped forward, golden eyes evaluating him. You recognize this place through inherited knowledge. But do you understand its significance? Before Issei could respond, the chamber filled with spectral figures, translucent beings of diverse forms representing every supernatural faction. Angels with multiple wings, devils with aristocratic bearing, fallen angels with feathers of shadow, gods and goddesses from countless pantheons, elemental spirits, dragons. Of impossible size condensed to humanoid form, all gathered in formal assembly. At their center stood a single throne, crafted from material that seemed to exist between states of matter, neither solid nor liquid nor gas but somehow all three simultaneously. It radiated power that transcended factional differences, drawing all eyes toward it. The conclave of realms, memory intoned. The moment when boundaries were first established. When the great wheel of existence was set in motion. Before factions, before wars, before the sundering that divided supernatural society. The spectral gathering moved in accelerated time. Debates and discussions flowing too rapidly for normal perception to follow. Issei's enhanced consciousness processed the information regardless, absorbing centuries of history in moments. The immortal throne was created to maintain balance, he said, understanding flowing naturally now. When the original architects of reality recognized that no single faction could be trusted with overarching power, they created a sovereign position that transcended factional interests. Memory nodded slightly. And who sat upon that throne? The spectral scene shifted, focusing on a figure approaching the throne. To Issei's surprise, the figure's appearance constantly shifted, sometimes appearing angelic, sometimes demonic, sometimes draconic or divine or elemental. As if all supernatural races were represented in a single being. The first immortal king was a composite entity, Issei said, the knowledge unfolding within him. A voluntary fusion of representatives from each faction, merging their essences to create something beyond factional bias. Correct, memory confirmed, but such perfect unity could not last eternally. What happened to shatter it? The scene changed again, showing the composite entity gradually destabilizing, its unified form fragmenting as internal conflicts emerged. The throne remained occupied, but its occupant grew increasingly unstable. The factions within the composite began to conflict, Issei observed. Each supernatural race sought greater influence over the whole. The balance collapsed from within. Memory circled him slowly, and after the composite entity failed, what solution was implemented? The succession compact, Issei replied without hesitation. A single being would occupy the throne for a set period before passing the mantle to another from a different faction. A rotation of power meant to prevent any single group from dominating. You speak accurately of events long forgotten by most supernatural beings. Memory acknowledged. Now tell me why the immortal throne stands vacant in the current age. This question probed deeper, requiring Issei to access more fragmented memories. He closed his eyes, allowing the ancient knowledge to surface naturally rather than forcing it. The rotation system eventually failed as well, he said slowly. As factions grew more isolated and antagonistic, they became unwilling to relinquish the throne when their term ended. The biblical faction, angels, devils, and fallen angels, eventually seized control permanently, claiming superior right through their connection to the Creator. The spectral scene shifted to show terrible warfare, beings of immense power clashing in dimensional battles that tore reality itself. The throne stood empty amidst the chaos, its power dormant but not destroyed. The Great War, Issei continued. Not just the conflict recorded in devil history between angels, fallen angels, and devils, but an earlier, greater conflict that involved all supernatural factions fighting for control of the immortal throne. And the outcome? Memory pressed. Catastrophic balance, Issei replied, the term emerging from deep memory. So much destruction that no faction retained sufficient power to claim total victory. The survivors agreed to seal the throne's power rather than risk further devastation. Memory's golden eyes glowed brighter. And yet here you stand, a human vessel awakening to that sealed power. Why now, after countless millennia? This question touched the core of Issei's emerging purpose. He felt the answer resonating within him, aligning with his own developing understanding. Because the separation between realms is failing, he said with quiet certainty. The boundaries established after the Great War are weakening. Without intervention, the realms will either collapse into one another or become permanently isolated, both outcomes catastrophic for all existence. Memory stepped back, joining the other arbiters. You have demonstrated understanding of origins and purpose. The trial of blood is complete. The spectral scene dissolved, the first court fading into mist once more. Issei felt something shift within him, the awakening power responding to his successful navigation of the first trial, integrating more fully with his consciousness. Judgment stepped forward, silver eyes gleaming. Understanding the past is merely foundation. Now you must demonstrate wisdom in the present. The trial of judgment begins. The mist reshaped itself into a circular chamber with 7 doors. each bearing distinct symbols supernatural factions. At the center stood a simple stone table with 7 chairs. The council chamber, Judgment explained, where the immortal king hears petitions and resolves disputes between realms. Your trial is to adjudicate a conflict with implications for all factions. The doors opened simultaneously, and representatives from 7 major supernatural groups entered. An angel with 6 white wings, a devil aristocrat, a fallen angel leader, a Norse deity, a Yukai chieftain, a dragon in human form, and a human magician. Issei recognized none of them personally, yet understood they were constructs created for this trial rather than actual faction representatives. They took their seats, regarding him with expressions ranging from hostility to cautious respect. Sovereign Arbiter, the angel began, using the formal address for the immortal king during council sessions, we bring before you a matter of grave concern. The boundary between human and supernatural realms is failing in specific locations. Incursions are occurring with increasing frequency. The devil leaned forward, his expression calculating. These weaknesses represent opportunity. The human realm has long been artificially separated from supernatural influence. Perhaps it's time to re-establish the natural order, with devils guiding human development. You mean controlling humans? The magician countered sharply. Humanity has thrived precisely because of separation from supernatural manipulation. The fallen angel's wings rustled as she spoke. The boundaries were never meant to be permanent. They were emergency measures implemented during crisis. Their natural dissolution should be welcomed, not prevented. Easy to say when your faction stands to benefit, the Yukai leader growled. Fox ears flattening against her head. Some of us remember the persecution we faced when boundaries were thinner. Humans and more powerful supernatural factions alike hunted my kind nearly to extinction. The Norse deity, appearing as a battle-scarred warrior, struck the table with his fist. The old ways were better. Let humans know their gods again. Let them remember to fear and respect the powers beyond their comprehension. The dragon, who had remained silent until now, finally spoke. You all think too small. The boundary failures threaten more than just the human-supernatural divide. All realms face potential collapse if the degradation continues unchecked. Judgment turned to Issei. You have heard the initial positions. As sovereign arbiter, how do you proceed? Issei studied the representatives, recognizing the complex interplay of legitimate concerns, historical grievances, and naked self-interest. The trial tested not just his understanding of faction politics but his approach to leadership and conflict resolution. He took the central seat, the position automatically conferring authority in this constructed scenario. Before rendering judgment, I require greater clarity. Each representative will explain how boundary failures specifically impact their faction, with concrete examples rather than general principles. What followed was a detailed discussion that revealed the true complexities beneath surface positions. The angel described incidents where human prayers had inadvertently opened dimensional rifts, pulling unprepared humans into celestial spaces where their mortal forms suffered. The devil acknowledged territorial ambitions but also legitimate concerns about supernatural creatures becoming trapped in the human realm. Without access to necessary magical energies, each representative offered perspective that complicated the simple narrative of opportunism versus protection. Throughout the exchange, Issei asked precise questions that revealed underlying concerns and potential common ground. I understand your positions more clearly now, he said after nearly an hour of discussion. The fundamental question isn't whether boundaries should exist, but how they should function. Complete separation has created as many problems as it has solved. He rose, moving to a map that had appeared on the chamber wall, a complex dimensional representation of interconnected realms. The original design wasn't isolation, he continued, tracing connections between territories. It was regulated interaction, controlled pathways between realms that allowed necessary flow while preventing chaotic collapse. The representatives exchanged glances, some nodding in reluctant agreement. My judgment is this: the boundaries will not be eliminated, nor will they be artificially reinforced in their current failing state. Instead, we will implement a system of regulated crossings, dimensional anchors that allow controlled movement between realms. He turned back to the council. Each faction will host anchor points under shared oversight. No single group will control access. Humans with supernatural awareness will be gradually introduced to the wider reality rather than subjected to sudden exposure. Supernatural beings will have regulated access to the human realm, with responsibilities accompanying privileges. That satisfies no one completely. The devil observed. Precisely, Issei replied. A judgment that fully pleases any single faction would necessarily disadvantage others. Balance requires compromise from all. The dragon representative laughed suddenly. He understands. The immortal throne was never about imposing a single vision, it was about finding the sustainable center between competing interests. Judgment stepped forward as the council chamber began to dissolve. You have demonstrated wisdom in balancing present concerns. The trial of judgment is complete. Again, Issei felt the power within him shifting, integrating more fully with his consciousness as the second trial concluded. The awakening progressed, memories and abilities settling into coherent patterns rather than chaotic fragments. Vision. The third arbiter with eyes of deepest black, moved to the center of the dissolving scene. Understanding past and managing present are foundations. Now you must demonstrate for Issei the ability to perceive consequences beyond immediate horizons. The trial of vision begins. The mist coalesced once more, this time forming a vast observatory unlike any human construction. The circular room was open to the sky, but the stars visible above were unfamiliar, constellations from dimensions beyond normal perception. The walls were lined with instruments both recognizable and alien, telescopes and astrolabes alongside devices that seemed to measure realities rather than physical phenomena. The celestial observatory, Vision explained, where the immortal king traces he paths of realms through the great wheel of existence. Your final trial tests your ability to perceive patterns beyond factional concerns. In the center of the observatory stood a complex model of interconnected spheres, a three-dimensional representation of supernatural realms and their relationships. Each sphere glowed with distinct color and intensity, with threads of light connecting them in intricate patterns. The model of realms, Issei said, recognition flowing from the awakening memories. A living representation of cosmic structure. Yes, Vision confirmed. For your trial, you must identify the fracture patterns threatening reality and propose a solution that preserves the whole rather than privileging any part. Issei approached the model, studying it with newly awakened senses. The spheres, each representing a supernatural realm, orbited a central point in complex, overlapping patterns. Most connections between spheres glowed steadily, indicating stable relationships. However, several connections flickered erratically or had darkened entirely, showing broken bonds between realms. The fractures follow a pattern, he observed, circling the model slowly. There not random failures but systematic degradation along specific pathways. Vision watched silently as Issei analyzed the model, occasionally touching points where connections appeared fingers made contact. Brief visions flashed through his mind, glimpses of the affected realms and the consequences of their growing isolation. It's a communication failure, Issei said after several minutes of examination. The realms aren't physically separating so much as losing meaningful connection. They've forgotten how to speak to each other. He indicated a particularly damaged section where the human realm connected to various supernatural domains. Here, humans have developed belief systems that no longer accommodate supernatural reality. And here, supernatural factions have evolved protocols that make human interaction nearly impossible. You perceive the symptom, Vision acknowledged. What is the cause? Issei studied the model more deeply, tracing fracture patterns to their origins. The central point around which all realms orbited, the nexus of existence, pulsed with uneven light, its rhythm disturbed. The heart is arrhythmic, he said, placing his hand over the central nexus. When the immortal throne was sealed, the pulse that synchronized all realms became irregular. Without that harmonizing force, each domain gradually shifted to its own rhythm, its own isolated frequency. And the solution? Vision pressed. This question touched the core of his awakening purpose. Issei felt possible futures branching before him, countless potential approaches with wildly different outcomes. His emerging consciousness could trace these possibilities, following causal chains far beyond normal perception. Not reversion to the past, he said finally. The original system failed for valid reasons. Forcing realms back into previous patterns would merely restart the cycle of conflict. He began adjusting the model, gently shifting the orbits of various spheres, strengthening some connections while allowing others to remain altered. The solution is adaptive harmony, a new configuration that respects how realms have evolved while re-establishing essential connections. Under his guidance, the model gradually stabilized. The central nexus began pulsing more regularly, its rhythm influencing but not controlling the movements of individual realms. Connections between spheres strengthened the net where they served mutual benefit and transformed where old patterns had become harmful. The immortal throne must evolve as well, Issei continued, his voice gaining resonance. Not a position of control but a point of harmonization, maintaining balance by facilitating communication rather than imposing uniformity. The model responded to his words, the central nexus transforming from a fixed point to a dynamic presence that moved through the system, temporarily strengthening connections where needed before moving on. The entire representation shifted from rigid hierarchy to living network. Vision's obsidian eyes reflected the transformed model. You propose a fundamental change to the nature of sovereignty itself. Yes, Issei acknowledged, because the nature of existence has changed. The original immortal king governed a younger cosmos with fewer established powers. Today's reality requires cooperation more than control. And if factions resist this new approach, if they prefer isolation to interdependence, then they choose stagnation and eventual collapse, Issei replied simply. The boundaries are failing regardless of preference. The choice isn't between Chang'e and stability, it's between managed adaptation and chaotic dissolution. Vision stepped back, rejoining the other arbiters. You have demonstrated foresight, the ability to perceive patterns beyond mediate concerns and envision sustainable futures. The trial of vision is complete. The observatory dissolved into mist as the three arbiters formed a triangle around Issei. Their eyes, gold, silver, and black, glowed with increasing intensity as they spoke in unison. The trials are concluded. You have proven worthy through understanding of past, wisdom in present judgment, and vision of harmonious future. The immortal throne accepts your claim. They raised their hands simultaneously, directing streams of pure energy toward Issei. The power connected with the awakening essence within him, catalyzing the final transformation. The fragmentary seal shattered completely, releasing the full power of the immortal king into Issei's consciousness. Unlike previous surges, this final awakening flowed smoothly. The trials had prepared him to receive the power in its entirety rather than fragments. Knowledge, abilities, and perspective integrated with his core identity, expanding rather than overwhelming his sense of self. The arbiters spoke one final time before fading. Rise, immortal king. The vacant throne awaits its sovereign. Reality reasserted itself around Issei as the mist dissolved, returning him to the mountain plateau where the awakening ritual had begun. The containment array still glowed with power, though its purpose had shifted from restraint to channeling. Grayfia and Rias maintained their positions, their expressions revealing awe despite their usual composure. Issei stood at the center of the array, transformed yet recognizable. His physical appearance remained largely unchanged, but his presence had altered fundamentally. The crimson energy that had manifested sporadically before now formed a subtle aura around him, not flaring wildly but flowing in controlled currents that responded to his consciousness. When he opened his eyes, they briefly glowed with internal light, gold, silver, and black simultaneously before settling back to their natural color. Issei, Grayfia called, her voice cautious. He turned toward her, a smile spreading across his face, familiar despite the power now radiating from him. I'm here. The awakening is complete. The energy discharge was unprecedented, Rias reported, professional assessment overcoming her evident shock. The containment array nearly failed several times. And those entities, the arbiters, weren't part of any known awakening protocol. They're guardians of the throne's power, Issei explained, stepping out of the central circle. The containment array powered down as he left its confines. The emergency measures no longer necessary now that his power had stabilized. They appear only when a true heir approaches awakening. You were gone for hours, Grayfia said. From our perspective, you stood motionless while energy patterns shifted around you. What happened? I was tested, Issei replied simply. 3 trials to prove worthiness beyond mere bloodline or power capacity. He looked out across the mountain range, his enhanced perception allowing him to see far beyond normal human limitations. The boundaries between realms were clearly visible to him now, not just at his nexus point but throughout the region, a complex network of overlapping dimensional membranes. The fractures are worse than we realized, he observed. The veil between realms is failing systemically, not just at isolated points. Rias approached cautiously, her analytical mind clearly processing the implications of what she had witnessed. You've fully awakened then. You are the Immortal King. Yes, Issei confirmed, though not as that role was originally conceived. The throne's purpose has evolved, just as supernatural society has evolved. What happens now? Grayfia asked, practical as always. Issei turned back to them, his expression serious despite the power now at his command. Now comes the difficult part. Claiming the throne is merely prelude, establishing a new balance between realms is the true challenge. He created a small magical circle with a gesture, far more complex than anything he could have managed before the awakening. Within it appeared a map similar to the one he had seen in the Celestial Observatory, a representation of interconnected realms with fracture points highlighted. Various factions will react differently to my emergence, he continued. Some will see opportunity, others threat. We need to establish communication channels with key leaders beforehand. Sirzek should be informed first, Grayfia suggested. As a Satan, his response will influence Devil society broadly. Agreed, Issei nodded, though we should approach him privately rather than through official channels. This news needs careful management. Rias studied him with growing curiosity. You speak like a politician now. Is that part of the awakening? Statecraft is essential knowledge for the Immortal King, Issei acknowledged with a slight smile. Though I'd like to think I'm integrating it with my own perspective rather than simply parroting ancient protocols. You seem remarkably yourself, Rias observed. Most beings who undergo power awakenings experience personality fragmentation or complete overwrite. The trials ensured integration rather than replacement, Issei explained. I'm still Issei Hyodo, but with expanded consciousness and capabilities. My core values and identity remain intact, just contextualized within greater understanding. Grayfia nodded, seeming satisfied with this assessment. We should leave this location soon. Despite our precautions, an energy discharge of this magnitude will attract attention. We've established a secure facility in the Underworld where you can adapt to your awakened state before making public appearances. Issei considered this, weighing practical security against broader strategic concerns. A brief period of seclusion makes sense, but not extended isolation. The fractures in the veil require relatively urgent attention, and establishing relationships with faction leaders should begin sooner rather than later. You're advocating a more active approach than Sirzek might prefer, Grayfia noted. Neither approving nor disapproving. The Immortal Throne doesn't answer to Devil authority, Issei replied, though without arrogance. I respect Sirzek and value his counsel, my responsibility extends to all realms, not just the Underworld. Rias's eyes widened slightly at his forthright statement. You've certainly embraced your sovereignty quickly. Not sovereignty in the sense of absolute authority. Issei clarified. More responsibility for facilitation. The Immortal King doesn't rule over factions so much as maintain connections between them. He paused, sensing a disturbance in the magical atmosphere around them. His enhanced perception identified the cause immediately, a transportation circle forming at the edge of the plateau, its magical signature. Distinctly Devil in origin but not matching either Grayfia or Rias. We have company, he said quietly. Grayfia and Rias tensed, preparing defensive measures. The transportation circle completed its formation, glowing with silver-blue energy before a figure materialized within it. A woman with silver hair similar to Grayfia's but styled differently, wearing an elaborate dress that marked her as Devil aristocracy. Lady Seraphal, Grayfia acknowledged, surprise evident in her tone despite her usual composure. Seraphal Leviathan, one of the 4 great Satans who governed Devil society, stepped forward with uncharacteristic seriousness. Usually known for her playful, almost childlike demeanor, she now moved with the gravity befitting her station. The magical discharge was detected throughout the Underworld. She said without preamble, Sirzek sent me to investigate personally while he maintains plausible deniability. Her gaze fixed on Issei, assessing him with ancient eyes that belied her youthful appearance. So the rumors are true. The immortal throne has an heir. Issei met her gaze steadily. Yes, though not precisely as the old legends described. Serafal circled him slowly, her magical senses clearly evaluating his transformed aura. Fascinating. Your power signature is unlike anything in our records, not angel, devil, dragon, or divine, yet somehow incorporating elements of all. The immortal king transcends factional classifications, Grayfia explained. That's the fundamental nature of the throne. So the ancient texts claim, Serafal agreed. Though until now, many considered those texts allegorical rather than historical. She completed her circuit around Issei before stopping directly before him. What are your intentions toward Devil Society, Immortal King? The directness of her question reflected both concern and respect, acknowledging his status while establishing her own responsibility to her people. Cooperation rather than control, Issei replied with equal directness. Devil Society will maintain its autonomy, as will all factions. The Immortal Throne's purpose is to address the weakening boundaries between realms, a crisis that threatens all supernatural groups equally. Quote, Serafal's serious expression gave way to a small smile. A diplomatic answer. Though I wonder if reality will prove as neat as intention. She glanced at Grayfia. Sears requests your presence, all of you, at the secure facility beneath Lucifer Palace. The other Satans have been informed of developments. They're eager to meet our new sovereign neighbor. Not sovereign over devils, Issei clarified again. That distinction is important to maintain from the beginning. Indeed it is, Serafal agreed, though something in her tone suggested skept. ICISM about how well that distinction would hold. Shall we? Political situations tend to evolve rapidly when power dynamics shift. Issei looked to Grayfia and Rias, silently confirming their readiness. When they nodded, he turned back to Serafal. Lead the way, Lady Leviathan. It seems introductions to devil leadership are happening sooner than anticipated. Serafal created a transportation circle large enough to accommodate all four of them, its design far more elaborate than standard teleportation magic. The security protocols around Lucifer Palace have been temporarily modified to accept your magical signature. She explained to Issei, a courtesy extended to few non-devils. As they stepped into the circle, Issei felt the mountain plateau dissolve around them, reality shifting as they traveled between dimensions. His awakened senses perceived the journey differently now, not merely displacement but passage through the complex dimensional membranes separating human world from underworld. The political landscape awaiting him would be challenging, the fractured veil between realms even more so. Yet as they materialized in the heart of devil territory, Issei felt a strange confidence that transcended his 17 years of human life. The awakening had prepared him not just with power but with perspective, the wisdom to navigate complexities that would have overwhelmed his former self. The immortal king had returned. The vacant throne would remain empty no longer. And supernatural society, whether ready or not, would need to adapt to a fundamental shift in the cosmic order. The secure facility beneath Lucifer Palace defied conventional architectural understanding. Its spaces seemed to exist partially outside normal dimensional constraints, corridors extending further than physically possible. Ceilings arching into heights that shouldn't fit within the palace's external dimensions. Issei absorbed these spatial anomalies with newfound comprehension, recognizing the complex spellwork that allowed devil architecture to transcend physical limitations. His awakened senses perceived layers of reality simultaneously, the physical structure, the magical reinforcements, and the dimensional folding that created spaces between spaces. Impressive, he commented as Serafal led their group through a series of security checkpoints. The dimensional architect, Chure here predates modern devil civilization, doesn't it? These foundations were established during the early post-rebellion period. Serafal glanced back at him, mild surprise crossing her features. Correct. The deeper levels of Lucifer Palace incorporate structures built by the original Lucifer himself, though they've been extensively modified since. The historical resonance is still present in the stonework, Issei observed. Running his hand all read to be ordinary marble but felt somehow alive to his enhanced perception. Memories embedded in matter. Your awakened abilities extend to psychometry? Rias asked, her scholarly interest evident. Among other things, Issei acknowledged. The Immortal King functions partially as a historian of realities, preserving knowledge that might otherwise be lost between epochs. They passed through a final security barrier, a shimmering veil of energy that analyzed their magical signatures before permitting entry. Beyond lay a circular chamber where 4 figures awaited them, seated at a round table clearly designed for diplomatic meetings between equals. Issei recognized Sirzek's immediately, his crimson hair and aristocratic features, marking him as Rias's brother despite his more mature appearance. Beside him sat an imposing man with green hair and stern features, his aura radiating barely contained power. The third figure was and some blonde man with a relaxed posture that belied the ancient energy Issei sensed within him. The fourth seat was presumably Seraphal's, now empty as she escorted them into the chamber. The 4 great Satans, Grayfia announced formally, Sirzek's Lucifer, Ajuka Beelzebub, Falbium Asmodeus, and Seraphal Leviathan. The green-haired man, Ajuka, leaned forward, studying Issei with analytical intensity. So this is the heir to the immortal throne. Younger than expected, and still retaining human characteristics despite full awakening. Fascinating. The awakening preserves the host's identity while integrating the throne's power. Issei explained, meeting the Satan's evaluating gaze without discomfort. A synthesis rather than replacement. Unprecedented in power transference mechanics, Ajuka noted. Most inheritance systems either maintain separation between host and power or result in complete assimilation. Sirzek gestured toward the empty chairs around the table. Please, join us. This meeting is historic regardless of what follows, and comfort seems appropriate for such occasions. As they took their seats, Issei noticed the subtle magical currents flowing through the chamber, privacy wards, truth enhancement fields, and diplomatic protection spells woven into a seamless system. The table itself incorporated runic elements that encouraged honest negotiation while discouraging aggression, devil craftsmanship at its most sophisticated. I must admit, Sirzek began once they were settled. When Grayfia first reported finding a potential heir to the immortal throne, I was skeptical. The legends have generated numerous false positives over the millennia. Understandable skepticism, Issei acknowledged. The throne's power has been sealed for so long that why considered it mythological rather than historical? Falbium Asmodeus, who had remained silent until now, spoke in a surprisingly casual tone given his imposing appearance. The question before us isn't whether you've awakened as the immortal king. The energy signature detected throughout the underworld confirms that reality. The question is what it means for established power structures. Direct, and practical, exactly what Issei would expect from the Satan responsible for military affairs. A valid concern. The historical role of the immortal king often conflicted with factional autonomy, It contributed to the throne's eventual sealing. And your interpretation of the role? Ajuka inquired. Evolution rather than restoration, Issei replied. The original concept of the immortal king's supreme authority over all supernatural factions is neither practical nor desirable in the current era. Each faction has developed sophisticated governance systems that function effectively within their domains. Yet you claim a throne that historically superseded such systems, Sirzek observed neutrally. I claim responsibility rather than control, Issei clarified. The immortal throne exists to maintain connections between realms, not to govern their internal affairs. My awakening corresponds with the accelerating breakdown of the veil between realms, the dimensional boundaries separating supernatural domains. He created a small magical diagram above the table, a scaled version of the realm map he had studied during the trial of vision. The Satans leaned forward, examining the representation with evident interest. These fracture patterns, Issei continued, indicating areas where connections between realms had weakened or broken, represent failures in the dimensional architecture established after the Great War. Without intervention, they will lead either to catastrophic realm collapse or permanent isolation. Ajuka studied the diagram with particular intensity, S expression suggesting recognition of patterns he had observed independently. This aligns with anomalies have been tracking through the Kenkara formula. Dimensional instabilities have increased exponentially over the past century. Precisely, Issei nodded. And addressing these instabilities requires coordination across factional boundaries, the fundamental purpose of the immortal throne. A diplomatic framing, Seraphal noted. Echoing her earlier skepticism, though history suggests the throne's power enables more direct intervention should you choose that path. The underlying concern was clear: would Issei respect factional autonomy in practice, regardless of his stated intentions? The awakened power at his command theoretically allowed him to impose his will across supernatural domains. Power and wisdom aren't synonymous, Issei replied carefully. The trials I underwent during awakening tested judgment as much as strength. Forcing compliance would create resistance that undermines the very stability I'm meant to preserve. You speak with surprising maturity for one so young, Falbium observed. Chronological age has limited relevance to the awakened consciousness, Issei explained. The immortal king's essence carries accumulated wisdom from previous manifestations. I retain my core identity as Issei Hyodo, but with perspectives that span epochs. Sears leaned back, his expression thoughtful. The immediate question before us is how to introduce your emergence to broader devil society. The energy discharge from your awakening has already generated speculation throughout the underworld. Rumors spread quickly in supernatural circles. Transparency with appropriate context, Issei suggested. Acknowledge my awakening as the immortal king while emphasizing cooperative rather than hierarchical relationships with established factions. A joint announcement, Rias added, speaking for the first time since entering the chamber. Presenting the Immortal King alongside the four Satans as allied equals rather than competitive authorities. Ajuka nodded slowly. Symbolism matters in devil politics. Such an approach would establish the tone for future interactions. It also prevents speculation about secret alliances or power plays, Serafal added. Devils love conspiracy theories almost as much as they love status. Sears turned to Issei directly. Before proceeding with public acknowledgement, I must ask, what are your immediate intentions? The fractures you've identified clearly require attention, but what specific actions do you anticipate taking? A fair question that cut to the heart of practical concerns. Issei considered carefully before responding. 3 initial priorities, he said. First, establishing diplomatic connections with leaders from all major factions, not just devils but angels, fallen angels, and various mythological pantheons. Communication channels must be created before crisis points emerge. He indicated specific areas on the floating diagram where realm boundaries appeared most degraded. Second, addressing the most critical fracture points before they collapse completely. This will require on-site manipulation of dimensional boundaries, essentially magical reinforcement of weakening structures. And third, he continued, locating the physical manifestation of the immortal throne itself to its power. The actual throne remains hidden, sealed away during the ancient conflicts. Reconnecting with it would stabilize the power and provide more precise control over boundary maintenance. The throne physically exists, Rias asked, academic curiosity evident in her tone. The texts I've studied suggested it was metaphorical rather than material. Both, in a sense, Issei explained. The immortal throne exists as both concept and object, a physical seat of power located at a nexus point between all realms. Its location was deliberately obscured when the power was sealed, but finding it would significantly enhance stability efforts. Ajuka's expression had shifted from evaluation to intellectual engagement. Fascinating. A multi-dimensional anchor point that maintains connections between disparate reality systems. The theoretical applications are extraordinary. The practical implications are more pressing, Falbium noted dryly. Particularly how other factions will respond to these developments. The fallen angels have been unusually active recently, and Heaven maintains concerning silence on matters of dimensional stability. Which underscores the importance of establishing communication quickly. Issei agreed. Isolation between factions has exacerbated the boundary degradation. Cooperation isn't just diplomatically sound, it's existentially necessary. Sears exchanged glances with his fellow Satans, some unspoken communication passing between them before he addressed Issei again. The Devil faction is willing to acknowledge your position and cooperate on boundary stabilization efforts. However, we request a formal non-interference agreement regarding internal Devil governance. A reasonable precaution from their perspective, establishing boundaries had protected their authority while permitting necessary collaboration. Issei nodded without hesitation. Agreed. The immortal throne has no interest in disrupting effective governance systems. My RO. Le is connective rather than controlling. Then we have a foundation for cooperation, Searsex concluded. We'll arrange a formal introduction to Devil Society within the week, followed by Facilita. TED connections to other faction leaders. Sooner would be better than later, Serafal added. As Falbium noted, the fallen angels have increased activities significantly in recent months. Their intelligence networks are sophisticated. They likely already suspect something has occurred, even if they don't know specifics. Issei considered this, weighing diplomatic ideal against practical reality. Tomorrow, then, a brief announcement establishing basic facts, followed by more comprehensive explanation once initial reactions have been assessed. Agreed, Searsex nodded. Grayfia will coordinate the necessary arrangements. He turned to his queen with practiced efficiency. Please prepare the Crimson Assembly Hall for a formal presentation. Security protocols at maximum, but attendance open to representatives from all devil houses. As Grayfia acknowledged the instruction, Issei sensed a shift in the magical atmosphere outside the chamber, a subtle disturbance in the protection war. DS indicating someone awaiting permission to enter. Searsex noticed his attention shift. You sense it already. Impressive awareness for one still adapting to awakened abilities. The wards have a distinctive resonance pattern. Issei explained. Disruptions are easily detectable once you recognize the baseline frequency. Searsex gestured, and a section of the chamber wall became transparent, revealing a figure waiting in the antechamber beyond, a woman with silver hair similar to Grayfia's, dressed in formal attire that marked her as high-ranking devil nobility. My wife, Searsex explained with a small smile. Grayfia's sister-in-law, Lady Lucifuge. She likely sensed the unusual energy patterns and came to investigate personally. Issei's enhanced perception detected something or specific, a magical connection between this woman and himself, faint but distinctive. The awakened knowledge supplied context immediately. Lady Lucifuge descended from the bloodline that had served previous immortal kings as advisors and protectors before the throne was sealed. She carries the covenant mark, he observed quietly. Her bloodline was bound to the throne's service in ancient times. Grayfia's expression revealed mild surprise. You can sense that. The covenant mark has been dormant in our family for countless generations, considered a historical curiosity rather than active magic. The awakening of the throne reactivates dormant connections, Issei explained. Though the original binding was voluntary, not compulsory. Her ancestors chose service to the immortal throne as their purpose. Searsex studied him with renewed interest. You continue to demonstrate knowledge that validates your awakening. Few beings remember the true nature of the Lucifuge covenant. He gestured again, and the wall became transparent from both sides, allowing Lady Lucifuge to see into the chamber. Her eyes widened momentarily before her aristocratic composure reasserted itself. Searsex nodded permission to enter, and the magical barrier parted to admit her. My apologies for the interruption, she said formally, though her gaze remained fixed on Issei with evident curiosity. Quote, I sensed unusual energy patterns and came to ensure everything was secure. Your timing is excellent, Searsex replied. Allow me to introduce Issei Hyodo, the awakened heir to the immortal throne. Lady Lucifuge's composure faltered again, genuine shock crossing her features before she controlled her reaction. She approached the table slowly, her magical senses clearly assessing Issei's aura. The throne has chosen again, she murmured, almost to herself. Then, more formally, welcome, Sovereign of Realms. The Lucifuge family acknowledges your awakening. As she spoke, the dormant COV, Anant mark manifested briefly, a subtle sigil appearing on her forehead before fading from visible spectrum. Issei could still perceive it with his enhanced senses, a complex magical construct linking her bloodline to the throne's power. Thank you, Lady Lucifuge, he replied with equal formality. Though I seek allies rather than servants in this era. The original covenants were formed in different times, under different circumstances. Quote, yet they remain valid, she observed. The Lucifuge family has maintained the ancient knowledge through countless generations, awaiting the throne's return. An interesting development, one that suggested potential support structures already existed within Devil Society, preserved through bloodline traditions despite the throne's long absence. Your family's dedication honors the covenant, Issei acknowledged. I would welcome your insight as we address the weakening boundaries between realms. Lady Lucifuge inclined her head respectfully. The family archives contain records that may prove relevant. Historical accounts of previous boundary failures and the methods used to address them. Such information would be invaluable, Issei said. The awakened knowledge provided general principles but lacked specific tactical approaches to boundary reinforcement. Historical case studies would significantly enhance their response capability. Sir Zek's observed this exchange with thoughtful attention before addressing the broader group again. It seems certain aspects of supernatural society remember the immortal throne more clearly than others. His may prove advantageous as we introduce your awakening to various factions. Indeed, Ajuka agreed. Ancient bloodlines and institutions often preserve knowledge lost to mainstream historical accounts. The Lucifuge Covenant may be just one of several dormant connections reactivating with the throne's return. The implications extended beyond Devil Society. If other factions contain similar bloodlines or institutions with historical connections to the immortal throne, establishing productive relationships might prove easier than ant research potential counterparts in other supernatural domains, Rias suggested. Her strategic mind clearly processing the possibilities. Angelic choirs, fallen angel lineages, or mythological priesthoods that might maintain similar covenant relationships. An excellent approach, Issei agreed. Identifying existing connections would provide natural inroads for diplomatic outreach. As the discussion continued, developing into practical planning for the next day's announcement. Issei observed the interactions around him with dual perspective, his own personality noting interpersonal dynamics while the awakened knowledge provided historical context for devil political behaviors. The Satans operated as a functional team despite their distinct approaches. Sirzek's managed big-picture diplomacy, Ajuka focused on technical and theoretical implications. Falbium assessed security concerns, and Serafal considered political messaging. Their complementary skills had clearly contributed to Devil Society's stability in the post-war era. What interested him most, however, was how quickly they had adapted to his emergence. The initial wariness remained, naturally, but their practical focus on cooperation rather than competition suggested the evil faction might prove more flexible than historical accounts indicated. As the meeting concluded with specific assignments distributed for tomorrow's announcement, Issei found himself reflecting how differently this interaction had unfolded compared to his confrontation with Rizvam and the old Satan faction. The current devil leadership appeared genuinely committed to stability rather than dominance, a promising foundation for the collaborative approach his awakened wisdom suggested was necessary. The true test, of course, would come when boundary stabilization required sacrifices from various factions. Theoretical cooperation always came easier than practical compromise. But for now, this initial reception from Devil leadership represented a positive first step in what would inevitably be a complex diplomatic journey. As they rose from the table, Sirzek approached Issei directly. "We've arranged accommodations for you within the secure facility. While technically under Lucifer Palace, the quarters exist in a dimensional pocket with independent security protocols. You'll have privacy while remaining accessible for tomorrow's preparations." "Thank you," Issei replied. I should note that my awakened senses allow me to perceive and potentially traverse dimensional boundaries more directly than most beings. Conventional containment measures may prove permeable. A polite way of acknowledging that he could likely leave any devil facility if he chose, regardless of security measures. Better to establish transparency about such capabilities from the beginning, rather than create misunderstandings later. Sirzek smiled slightly, noted, "Consider the accommodations a courtesy rather than a constraint, then. Grayfia will show you to your quarters when you're ready." As the Satans departed to begin preparations for tomorrow's announcement, Rias approached Issei with undisguised academic curiosity. "Your awakening continues to evolve even after the trials concluded. The way you perceive dimensional structures, the recognition of the Lucifuge Covenant, these abilities seem to be emerging progressively rather than manifesting all at once." "Yes," Issei confirmed. "The trials established the foundation, but integration continues as I encounter relevant situations. The knowledge and abilities surface contextually rather than overwhelming my consciousness all at once." "A mercy, given the scope of what you're accessing," Grayfia observed as she joined them. "The complete knowledge of the Immortal King would likely shatter most minds if received instantaneously." The trials prepared me to receive it gradually, Issei agreed. Each encounter, each new situation, connects me with relevant aspects of the throne's power and purpose. Fascinating, Rias murmured. I'd like to document your progression if you're willing. The academic value alone would be significant, not to mention the historical importance. I have no objection, Issei said. Though security considerations may limit what can be recorded, at least initially. Grayfia nodded in agreement. Until your position is formally established and accepted across factions, caution remains advisable. The old Satan faction's early attempt to capture you suggests they recognized your potential before full awakening. Now that you've claimed the throne completely, their opposition will likely intensify. Along with interest from other factions, Rias added. The fallen angels have been unusually quiet since their initial attack. That suggests planning rather than abandonment of interest. They're gathering information, Issei confirmed, drawing on awakened strategic insights. Assessing capabilities and intentions before committing to a specific approach. Prudent, from their perspective. Grayfia gestured toward a doorway that had appeared in the chamber wall. We should continue this discussion in your quarters. The secure facility offers more comprehensive privacy than even this meeting room. As they followed her through the doorway, Issei experienced the strange sensation of moving between dimensional pockets, spaces that existed adjacent to normal reality without fully occupying it. Devil architecture at its most sophisticated, creating domains that followed different rules than their surroundings. The quarters Searsex had arranged proved surprising, ngly extensive, not merely a room but a complete living space with distinct areas for different functions. The aesthetic blended devil luxury with practical efficiency, creating an environment both comfortable and functional. These accommodations were originally designed for visiting dignitaries from other factions, Grayfia explained. Dimensionally isolated to provide security while respecting cultural differences in environmental preferences. It's perfect for our current needs, Issei acknowledged, appreciating the thoughtfulness behind the arrangement. He moved to what appeared to be a viewing window, though it clearly didn't connect to physical outside space given their location deep beneath Lucifer Palace. The window instead showed a real-time magical projection of the Underworld. RLD capital city, Lilith's gleaming spires and architectural wonders spreading across the landscape beneath an eternally twilight sky. The city pulsed with magical energy, countless devil auras moving through elaborate structures that defied conventional physics. Impressive, isn't it? Rias said, joining him at the window. Lilith represents thousands of years of devil civilization, rebuilt after the Great War with both traditional and progressive elements. I can see the historical layers, Issei observed, his enhanced perception identifying architectural periods and magical innovations throughout the cityscape. The older districts still maintain pre-war structural enchantments, while the newer sections incorporate elements from human world and other supernatural domains. You perceive more than most native devils, Grayfia noted with mild surprise. The Immortal King functions partly as witness to supernatural development, Issei explained. Preserving understanding of how LMS evolve and interconnect across epochs. His gaze shifted to specific points in the city where magical currents flowed with particular intensity. The ley line configuration is remarkable, designed to channel energy from multiple supernatural domains into a centralized distribution network. Practical for resource management but potentially vulnerable to boundary degradation. Rias exchanged glances with Grayfia. You've identified in moments what took our best magical theorists decades to understand. The ley line system is indeed becoming unstable as connections to other realms weaken. It's a microcosm of the larger problem, Issei said. Supernatural domains have developed interdependently, becoming more isolated from each other. The contradictory evolution creates structural vulnerabilities. He turned from the window, moving to a table where refreshments had been arranged. The simple act of pouring tea felt strangely grounding, a mundane activity amidst cosmic concerns. Tom Oro's announcement will focus on establishing my role in addressing boundary degradation, he continued, offering cups to both women. But the actual work requires more than public acknowledgement. We need practical cooperation across factional lines, which has proven historically challenging, Grayfia observed, accepting the offered tea. Even with the peace treaties established after the Great War, meaningful collaboration between supernatural domains remains limited. Hence the need for the immortal throne, Issei nodded. A neutral position with authority derived from function rather than factional alignment. Rias took a seat, her expression thoughtful. The political dynamics will be complex. Each faction will evaluate your emergence according to their own interests and historical biases. Some will see opportunity, others threat, Issei agreed. The key is establishing a consistent narrative that emphasizes mutual benefit rather than power redistribution. You've adapted, Ted remarkably quickly to supernatural politics, Rias noted, studying him over the rim of her cup. Issei smiled slightly. The awakening provides context and historical precedent. The basic principles aren't so different from human politics, just operating on longer timescales with higher stakes. And how much of Issei Hyodo remains? Grayfia asked directly. The human student seems increasing. Glide distant compared to the strategic thinker before us now. An important question that cut to the heart of his transformation. Issei considered carefully before responding. My core values and identity remain intact, he said after a moment. But they're contextualized differently now. The everyday concerns that occupied me before seem, not less real, but less immediate compared to the responsibilities of inherited. He paused, finding the right words to express the complex integration he was experiencing. Imagine someone who grew up in a small village suddenly discovering they were heir to a global corporation. Their fundamental character wouldn't change overnight, but their perspective and priorities would necessarily shift to accommodate new responsibilities. A significant understatement, given what you've inherited, Rias observed. True, Issei acknowledged with a small smile. The analogy has limitations, but the principle holds. I'm still myself, just operating in an expanded framework of understanding and obligation. Grayfia nodded, seeming satisfied with his explanation. That alignment between original personality and awakened power is why the throne chose you. Perfect vessels aren't those who disappear into the inherited role, but those who complement it with their unique qualities. A synthesis rather than replacement, Issei agreed. Which Rias? An important question for tomorrow's announcement. How should I present myself? As Issei Hyodo who has awakened to greater purpose, or as the immortal king who happens to inhabit this particular form? Both, Rias suggested without hesitation. Your dual nature is actually advantageous from a diplomatic perspective. It allows different factions to relate to whichever aspect resonates with their values and concerns. Traditional devil houses will respond better to ancient authority, Grayfia added. While progressive elements may find your human background more approachable. A balanced presentation, then, Issei nodded, acknowledging the awakening while maintaining continuity of identity. As they continued discussing practical approaches to tomorrow's announcement, Issei found himself appreciating how quickly Rias and Grayfia had adapted to his transformed status. Neither treated him with the awkward deference often afforded to sudden power shifts, nor did they ignore the fundamental change in his nature. Their pragmatic acceptance created space for productive planning rather than philosophical distractions. The conversation shifted to specific protocol considerations, how he should be introduced. Appropriate forms of address, ceremonial elements that would resonate with devil culture without overcommitting to their specific traditions. Throughout the discussion, Issei found himself drawing on the awakened knowledge for historical context while applying his own judgment to current circumstances. This balance, between ancient wisdom and present perspective, seemed to represent the ideal functioning of the immortal king. Not merely a vessel for power but an active interpreter, adapting eternal principles to evolving conditions. As evening deepened in the artificial twilight of the underworld, their planning gradually concluded. Tomorrow would bring the first public acknowledgement of his awakening, the beginning of a complex diplomatic process that would eventually extend across supernatural domains. You should rest, Grayfia advised as they finished. The awakening may be complete in principle, but your consciousness is still integrating the changes. Sleep allows for natural assimilation of transformative experiences. Good advice, Issei acknowledged, suddenly aware of a deep mental fatigue beneath his apparent alertness. The trials and subsequent discussions had demanded more of him than he'd realized in the moment. As Grayfia and Rias prepared to leave, Rias paused at the doorway. One last question, if you don't mind. Earlier, you mentioned locating the physical manifestation of the immortal throne as one of your priorities. Do you have any indication where it might be? General direction rather than specific location, Issei replied. The awakening established a connection to the throne's essence but not its physical form. Finding it will require following that connection through dimensional boundaries, essentially a metaphysical tracking process. And once found, what changes when you actually sit upon the immortal throne? An insightful question that probed beyond immediate concerns to longer-term implications. Issei appreciated her strategic thinking. Completion, he said simply. The awakening establishes the connection, but claiming the physical throne stabilizes and enhances the power. More importantly, it activates certain cosmic functions that have remained dormant during the throne's absence, mechanisms that maintain healthy boundaries between realms without requiring constant intervention. Automating the maintenance process, Rias nodded, understanding immediately. Rather than personally reinforcing each boundary failure, you'd be establishing a self-sustaining system. Exactly. The Immortal King was never meant to micromanage dimensional boundaries. The role was designed to establish and maintain the overall architecture, with natural processes handling routine maintenance. Then Ding the throne isn't merely symbolic but functionally essential, Grayfia observed. Yes, though the search must come after establishing diplomatic foundations. Moving between multiple supernatural domains tracking an ancient power source would create significant misunderstandings without proper preparation. Rias nodded in agreement. One step at a time, then. Tomorrow, we introduce the Immortal King to Devil Society. The greater journey follows from there. As they departed, leaving Issei alone in the dimensional pocket that would serve as his temporary home, he turned back to the magical window overlooking Lilith. The Devil capital glimmered with arcane energy, beautiful and alien simultaneously. Tomorrow would begin the public phase of his transformation, the formal acknowledgement of the Immortal King's return after countless millennia. Devil Society would be the first to recognize his awakening, but certainly not the last. Each supernatural faction would eventually need to rest the implications of the throne's restoration, in both promise and peril. Cooperation across factional lines had proven historically challenging, yet the weakening veil between realms made collaboration existentially necessary. His role was to facilitate that cooperation, to create connections where isolation had become habitual. As he watched the eternal twilight of the underworld, Issei reflected on how dramatically his life had changed in such a short time. From ordinary student to Immortal King in less than a week. Yet somehow, despite the cosmic scope of his new responsibilities, he felt a strange sense of rightness, as if he'd been unconsciously preparing for this role his entire life. The awakening had not replaced Issei Hyodo. It had revealed him more fully, even to himself. Chapter 2 End. The End. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.